Welcome back to the show where we give you all the Dolphins news you need to know about. Remember, guys, this show posts each and every single Sunday in case you guys are interested in watching more episodes. So before we get into the first news story, if you guys hear banging in the background, it's just construction next to my house, and my dogs might bark. So I apologize if it is a little bit of a distraction for listeners out there. But this first news story, it's a very quick one. I just really wanted to go through this really quickly. Obviously, you guys know if we cut Sue before June 1st, we're going to get a little bit of extra cash in the bank. The Dolphins have received $17 million in extra cap space after June 1st, which has already happened, and we've already seen the ramifications of that, which we're going to get into here in just a second. But hopefully after some of the moves we've already made and after we sign the rest of the draft class, I really hope that, I don't know what somebody's going to have to tell, I know somebody knows how much cap space we're going to have left over, but there are still some pretty high-profile names out there that could help the Dolphins. When you talk about Michael Kendricks is a huge name. Obviously, he's been tied to the organization in the past, but they might not go down that road because everything coming out of Dolphins camp and OTA so far is extremely positive on Jerome Baker and Raekwon McMillan. So that actually might not happen due to the fact that we have some young players that are progressing and really looking good. Also, Michael Kendrick's market is heating up, and there's a lot of teams attached to him, so he might be a little bit expensive just to add another linebacker in the mix. And obviously, Jonathan Hankins is another guy that the Dolphins could use. Obviously, they've been pretty vocal about how they want to play multiple defensive tackles, so I really don't think it matters that he's more of a 3-4 guy because obviously he doesn't have a lot of pass rush ability. He's just a run stuffer, but that helps us because we are a rotational team. Our coaches have said so far throughout this offseason, they're looking to play 10 DTs or 10 defensive linemen and rotate those guys. So Jonathan Hankins would help the depth at that position a lot. So there are still some moves the Dolphins could make, and that is after some of the moves they've made. I don't know how much cap space we're going to have left over, but they could utilize some of that cap space to go out and get some pretty good players. In case I didn't mention it already, or I did mention this, but just to say it one more time, the Dolphins have $17 million in extra cap space after June 1st, which has been tweaked a little bit since some of the moves we've already made. And some of the notable free agents that are left: Trey Boston, Dez Bryant, Kenny Vaccaro, Eric Reed, Jonathan Hankins, and Michael Kendricks. So those are some of the guys that are left. So this first legitimate, or not legitimate, but real Dolphin story, Dolphins signed Minkah Fitzpatrick, their first-round pick, obviously, of the 2018 season. The Dolphins have signed first-rounder Minkah Fitzpatrick, as Ian Rappaport of NFL.com tweets. In accordance with his slot, the defensive back will receive a 4-year, $16 million deal with a $10 million signing bonus. Heading into Friday, the Dolphins were one of two teams who had yet to sign any of their draft picks. However, things changed when the calendar flipped to June. Miami had just $300,000 in cap space on Thursday, but gained an additional $17 million in cap space on Friday when Ndamukong Suh's post-June 1st release became official. With that room, they carved out the necessary space to get to work on their draft class. Fitzpatrick, the 11th overall pick, projects to start at free safety with Rashad Jones alongside him at strong safety. TJ McDonald, who started every game in his suspension-shortened season, will be headed to the bench as the first backup behind both players. In addition to Fitzpatrick, the Dolphins have also inked 6th-rounder Cornell Armstrong. Okay, so this, I guess we have Cornell Armstrong, 7th-rounder Quentin Poling, and 7th-rounder 7th-round punter Jason Sanders, the club announced. I did not know that. I don't know how I missed that. So we haven't signed, unless it has happened, but I don't think we have signed Kalen Ballage or Jerome Baker or Mike Gesicki yet. I'm not 100% sure on that. So I'm going to be interested to see how much cap space we're going to have left over, and especially after this next news story. Dolphins Bobby McCain agree to extension. And obviously, just one more thing I want to say about the Minkah Fitzpatrick thing before we move on. I'm so glad that he got the $10 million signing bonus, because, man, you talk about a heartbreaking story and some of the things that the trials and tribulations that man had to go through, and to have it all rewarded fairly quickly, I think is an amazing story. So very happy for Minkah for getting paid like he did. Very happy about that. So. Next news story, Dolphins Bobby McCain agreed to an extension. The Dolphins have made Bobby McCain the league's highest paid nickelback. McCain has agreed to a 4-year, $27 million extension with the team that includes $13 million guaranteed, according to ESPN.com's Adam Schefter. McCain, a fifth-round pick back in 2015, was slated to enter his final year of his contract after the Dolphins carved out an additional $17 million, thanks to Ndamukongsu's post-June 1st cut. The Dolphins quickly moved to put their cap space towards a new deal with the talented young corner. McCain, 25 in August, has appeared in every Dolphins regular season game over the past 3 years. Last year, he set new career highs in interceptions with 2 picks, pass defense with 7 passes deflected, and total tackles with 45. Pro Football Focus ranked McCain as the 46th best qualified cornerback in the NFL in 2017. He was easily the Dolphins' best quarterback according to advanced metrics, and by any measure, really, as he outperformed outside starters Xavier Howard and Cordrea Tankersley. McCain's best deal's best, the 4-year, $20 million deal, $8 million fully guaranteed, signed by Patrick Robinson with the Saints this offseason. Although McCain is 5 years younger than Robinson, it's impressive that he came away with more considering Robinson's stellar 2017 performance and the fact that McCain did not have the added leverage of the open market. The Dolphins projected to return Howard and Tankersley as the starters on the outside, with McCain covering in the slot. First-rounder Minkah Fitzpatrick, who formerly inked his rookie deal on Friday, will start alongside the standout strong safety Rashad Jones. Whew! That was a long one. So I have a lot to say about this, and my brain's going in like 50 different directions right now because there's so many things that go along with it. I'll just start with, does he deserve this deal? In my opinion, yes, he does deserve this deal. It blew my mind that he was so low on the Pro Football Focus ranking, because when you watched him play last year, I mean, he was the most consistent. He might have been the most consistent Dolphin all year, and I don't even think that's really that close, because each and every single week, Bobby McCain was performing at a pretty dang high level, and so yeah, just so I don't go on a tangent 20 different places. I do think he deserved the deal. I do think he's going to be even better down the line. So I do, and I don't think it's that much money for a slot corner of his talents. Slot corner is a very, very underrated position. They take more snaps than I think any defender on the field does, because you really don't sub out your slot corner. So they take a ton of snaps. So it's very, very important, especially with the pass-happy league we're in now, to have a really good slot corner to line up with some of these dominant slot receivers like Julian Edelman and Doug Baldwin, Jarvis Landry now, Antonio Brown, Julio Jones. All of those guys switch all around in the offense to get, obviously to get better matchups and to get open. So when you have really, really good receivers like that line up all over the field, you really do need a really, really good slot corner. And in the running game, Bobby McCain was really good last year too. I thought he had a couple tackles for losses that were very, very impressive. And that is something that you have to do as a slot corner, not only defend the pass, but you also have to defend the run, because teams will run right at your slot corner. And Bobby McCain, I thought, did a very good job of that. And he's an all-around player, great man coverage player, very smart, very instinctive, very quick. Super athletic guy, so I'm very, very happy with this. And again, he's only 25 years old, so I completely agree. I think where the league is now, it's very hard to find a very good slot corner, and I think a lot of teams would kill to have somebody like Bobby McCain on their team. So I'm very happy that we locked him down for the long haul. And the other thing I want to bring up is just the move itself, in terms of, obviously, this is a player that the Dolphins wanted to keep, and we've seen in the past many times that the Dolphins lack of the ability to see talent blossom over time and really see talent in the future. Instead of players have to perform right now, they have to be really, really good right now. The development of stars has really not been one of the Dolphins' strong suit. In fact, I would argue that it's one of the biggest reasons we've been so mediocre over the last almost 20 years now, is because our ability of developing talent has been very poor. We've had very talented players, but they go on to have great careers with other teams because they're still in their prime. I mean, they still got 10 years left to be really, really good players, and they run out their first 3 or 4 years with us, or 5 years, which most of those years aren't their best. They're developing into the player that they're going to be, and then they leave us and have great careers with other franchises. And Bobby McCain, I thought, was one of those players. Obviously, the first 3 years of his career weren't the best. I mean, there were times where I thought Bobby McCain was so bad. He had some terrible, terrible seasons, man. I mean, he was really, really bad. A lot of that had to do with him lining up on the outside, and he wasn't that great in the slot either. He was overly aggressive at times. He just wasn't a very, very good player, and the Dolphins saw something in him. At least I thought, because they kept throwing him into the fire. They really never gave up on him. They really never attempted to replace him over the first 5 years of his career. And look what we got now. We've got one of the better slot corners in the league. He's only 25 years old, and that came with patience, the foresight to see a really good player in Bobby McCain, and development. And I think that's something that the Dolphins need to learn from, is just patience and development goes a long way, and that's something that we haven't been really great at over the last few years. We've been so inconsistent with regimes, and this organization has had so much turnover that it's very hard and difficult to do that, to develop young talent. And I think Adam Gase is really kicking off his legacy here in Miami very, very well when it comes to drafting really good players, developing those players into the players they are today, and surrounding them with a really good coaching staff and teachers. So I thought he's done a pretty good job of that. And it's a good thing we didn't. Another thing that the Dolphins have failed to do is, like I said, foreseeing the talent that they're going to be, locking them up before they get to the open market, where their market is just red hot. They're gonna get overpaid, and you just don't want to get into a bidding war like that, and you're most likely going to lose that player. So to lock him up now, and I guarantee you, if he played this last year out on his rookie deal, and next year, dude, he's going to get paid way more than what he got paid right now. I think he would have gotten paid way more than $27 million. So that's another thing that the Dolphins have really struggled with, is strategically locking people up before their market is way, way inflated, and they're not nearly as worth the money that they would get, or you just get them cheaper than they would have maybe that they are worth. So I really like this move by the Miami Dolphins for 3 different reasons, and I hope I explained those things to you guys fairly well. But I really, really enjoyed, or really, really liked what the Dolphins did there. And again, man, I've been doing this YouTube channel. One thing I want to say about Bobby McCain, I've been doing this channel for like 2 years now, and I've had a pretty good, pretty good ear to the ground in terms of the Dolphins community, and some of the players that they hate more than anything, and some of the players that they love. Bobby McCain is definitely one of those players that everybody hated. And to see everybody just like turn on a dime with him last year is very impressive. I mean, it's very, very hard, especially with Dolphins fans, to win them back. And I thought Bobby McCain was so good last year that a lot of people I think really, really like Bobby now. And before, that was not the case. A lot of people really hated him. So including myself, I didn't hate him, but I'm just saying I didn't think he was going to ever be the player he is today. And obviously there was a lot smarter people in the Dolphins building than us, and trusted him and believed in him, and it paid off. So it's really, really, really rare that we get some of these things right. And again, I'm just very, very happy about that. This next news story, the Dolphins have an open running back competition. This comes from Pro Football Rumors. The Dolphins have a number of running backs who could realistically earn the starting gig this season. Kenyon Drake, Frank Gore are the obvious frontrunners, and the organization is also expecting rookie Kalen Ballage to contribute at some point during the upcoming campaign. With several options to choose from, running back coach Eric Studsville made it sound like the Dolphins won't necessarily opt for a 2-headed or even 3-headed monster. Studsville said, quote, "The guy that gives us the best chance to win, that gives the Miami Dolphins the best chance to win Well, that he just repeated himself twice. Studville told Armando Salguera that, quote, "That's who's got to be the guy who's out there for us, helping us win football games." As the Dolphins sort out their running back depth chart, let's check out some war notes of the AFC. Okay, anyway, that's just not related to this article. So yeah, that was interesting for a lot of different reasons. Obviously, Adam Gase has made it very clear that he wants 2 running backs that are very good, and I think he successfully did that. He's got 3 really good ones, in my opinion, 3 really, really talented ones, and it sounds like Kalen Ballage has already got a package for him before he was even drafted. So that's pretty crazy. So yeah, I think I don't know. It's very, very weird that he said we're going with the guy that gives us the best chance to win. And I guess he means the starter, but again, that's not how Adam Gase does things. He's made that very clear multiple times that he wants 2 backs, and he likes running back by committee, and it really worked out last year very, very well. When Damian was healthy with Kenyon Drake, that was a very, very fun combination to watch, especially in the passing game. So to have Frank out there, to have Kalen out there, to have Kenyon out there rotating, I think would be the best. That would give us the best chance to win, because all 3 players do different things very, very well, and all 3 players do things similarly very, very well in terms of the passing game. Obviously, Frank Gore, many people call him the greatest of all time in pass protection. Kenyon Drake is a great route runner and a great receiving threat out of the backfield. Frank Gore is a very good receiving threat out of the backfield as well, because he's a super smart player. Same thing with Kalen. That's the best thing he did in college, was go out on passes and run routes and catching balls out of the backfield. So I think they all do things very, very well, similarly to each other. And if we have them out there at the same time, you really don't know what we're going to do. And that's something that the Philadelphia Eagles did very well last year. They had 3 backs, that super talented guys that could run the ball and catch the ball out of the backfield. When you talk about Clement and LeGarrette Blount, both of those guys do those 2 things pretty well. So when they were out there, when they had either LeGarrette or Corey Clement, you really didn't know what to do. And that really opened up the playbook for the Eagles as well. So I expect the same thing for us this year. It really is going to open up the playbook, allow us to get more mismatches on the offensive side. You saw last year when against New England, when Kenyon was on the linebacker, we hit him deep. Obviously, if he didn't trip, that would have been like a 80-yard touchdown. So those kind of things we can do with Kalen and Kenyon, and maybe not Frank, but those 2 for sure. So again, very interesting that he said we're trying to go for one guy. Now that could mean many different things, but I do think the best chance for the Dolphins to have success, especially on offense, is to play all 3 guys throughout the course of the game, because I think it presents a lot of issues for the opposing defense, and it keeps everybody fresh as well, especially Frank, who's obviously 35, old running back. Keep him fresh for the entire season is also very, very smart. So that's just my 2 cents on that whole situation. This next news story comes from the Finn Cider. Ryan Tannehill looking sharp during OTAs. This again comes from the Fit Cider. All eyes have been on Ryan Tannehill, and he's not disappointing. His teammates and coaches have been raving about how well he is commanding the offense during OTAs. The Miami Dolphins believe Tannehill was on the verge of becoming a star during the 2017 season, but that was not the case, as he re-injured his knee and was lost for the season. Let's see here. Yeah, so that was just a quick report on how Tannehill is doing so far in OTAs, in case you guys were wondering. In terms of some other key positions here, we got the wide receivers. New wide receiver Albert Wilson is playing everywhere for the Miami Dolphins. So there you go. So he's playing on the outside in the slot as well. The Dolphins' defensive line. Let's see here. Never mind. I got that mixed up. So there you go. There's a quick report on Ryan Tannehill. Again, that's something that we touched on in the last week's episode, about how it's different than years before, because his teammates it's insane. His teammates are raving about him, especially, players that have never really either have heard about Tannehill and, have never really watched him, or, like Josh Sitton and Daniel Kilgore, they've had nothing but glowing things to say about him. Rashad Jones, who's been here for all of Tannehill's ups and downs, has had great things to say about him. Danny Amendola, who has been obviously a rival for us for many years, has nothing but great things to say about him. And it's not like PR, the Dolphins trying to control their own narrative in terms of we really want people to believe in Tannehill. No. Like, this is legitimate stuff. There, and the way you can tell is just how, because what they say about him is so detailed. It's not like, yeah, he's a great quarterback and then that's it. Which then I was like, okay, so that's just a fake answer. But they just go into detail about what he does so well. And I think that is very telling about Tannehill. And even Darryl Loggins, who went back and watched the 2016 tape, and was very impressed, and it has been very impressed about what Tannehill has done on the field. I just think he's a different player. That he is the player that we thought he could be, with all of the talented physical attributes that he possesses, with his athleticism. People need to shut up. The man has great arm strength. I don't care what anybody. You would be crazy to say if he doesn't. I mean, just go watch deep throws with Tannehill. I mean, the man he has no problem throwing a deep ball. Accuracy has been his issue throughout his career. It's just been touch. Has nothing to do with arm strength. So he's always had everything you need to be a great quarterback. And that's why he got picked 8th overall in the 2012 draft. And he's also a very hard worker and a very smart player as well. So all of those things contributed to why he was picked so high. And I think all of those things are coming together now. And I think he's matured as a quarterback. And I think he is now truly a franchise starting player. And we saw that in 2016. We saw him become that in that season. And I think, I'm one of the few people that have always seen that in Tannehill. I think he's always been a very good quarterback, statistically. I think he's, especially with his surroundings. That's just me. But when you talk about everybody else, I think. But even then, though, he's just a different player. He's just a different person. You just get a different vibe when you hear him talk. When you hear other people talk about him and stuff that you're hearing. And especially another great point is to point out beat writers. Beat writers have criticized, Tannehill all the time, and to hear stuff like this about how sharp he's looking, and from different beat writers around the organization. Those are just all really, really good signs. And again, we have proof that Tannehill was that. It wasn't like, oh, this is just an admiration. He's never proved it on an NFL stage. He proved it in 2016. He was on a roll, man. He was on a roll. And he never looked better. So I'm very, very excited to see this next stage in his career, because I think it's going to be his best season yet. So I'm very, very excited. Very, very excited. I'm serious. I've never been more excited to see Tannehill play than in this particular season. I'm very, very excited about this. This next news story comes from the Palm Beach Post. How new defensive backs coaches plan to fix Miami Dolphins' woes. The Miami Dolphins' woes. Only 4 NFL teams were worse against opposing passers than the Miami Dolphins last season. Too often, defensive backs were left speaking about their failures to execute, and more disturbingly, their failures to communicate. That was the biggest problem last year, is communication. I mean, that we saw that in preseason, for God's sakes. They were just busted plays and it was simple stuff, man. It was very hard to watch. That team was so badly coached last year. And I don't care if you guys can't help. To me, that's coaching. When your team is not communicating correctly, that's just simple stuff, man. That is simple stuff. And that was one of the more frustrating things last year to deal with. Is that defense was so stupid. So stupid. That Panthers game was so hard to watch. It was just simple stuff that we just failed to execute and recognize, and tackling was poor. It was just a bad season last year. Continuing on with the article, I didn't mean to go off on that rant. It cost longtime defensive back coach Lou Anarumo his job, part of a board off-season coaching staff shakeup by Coach Adam Gase. First-year defensive back coach Tony Oden and assistant defensive backs coach Ronaldo Hill, excuse me, I don't know why that got me all mixed up, have been hired to fix the problems. And so far, the players are impressed. Yeah, if you guys have watched interviews with the players so far this OTAs, this has been one of the more prevalent things. Is how glowing all the defensive backs have talked about how they trust their new coaches because they were former players, and they feel like I guess that allows them to trust them more. And that's one of the things I really picked up on throughout the interviews. Let's see here. This is a quote from Bobby McCain. He said, "They're both from the Lions. They're both really good coaches. Coach Oden is a good coach, and Coach Hill is a good coach. They're both proven." This is from Bobby McCain. "I know Coach Oden has a Super Bowl ring with the Saints. Speaking of personality, don't take this the wrong way, but we're all not out here to be friends. We're a family, and we're here to do a job, but as a family." Players said Oden and Hill are going to hold them accountable, but are also stretching interpersonal connections. "Oden's going to tell you you're doing this wrong, but it's out of love," Bobby McCain said. "And if you're doing it right, he's going to tell you you're doing it right, and it's out of love. He wants to tell you the truth, and we're going to get it done. If we do something out there that's wrong, we'll correct it when we get in the room. Boom, done. That way the guys behind you don't do the same thing." I guess he's saying like that don't make the same mistake, and they correct it and stuff of that nature. Too often last season, Dolphins defensive backs were exposed to the wrong thing. Players say the new coaches are aware and are addressing it. Communications, TJ McDonald said. TJ McDonald said, quote, "Communication is a big thing. I think there were some instances last year where we lacked some communication. That's the biggest emphasis that Oden brings. That's why that's what we're doing right now, making sure that we all communicate. We're all on the same page. We're all making sure that we get into a contract with each other on the field through verbal communication, hand signs, whatever it is." He definitely does a good job of stressing that. I think it'll definitely pay off, especially big plays. The Dolphins were 24th in the NFL in opponent completion percentage. Too often opponents were completing passes with great ease. Players say they believe they'll be playing tighter coverage. Oda believes in the talent that's in the defensive back room, and really there's no reason this group shouldn't be much, much better. Compete and get better, Odin said. "Every day, all of these guys we talk about every day is an interview. We can get better tomorrow and today, and keep the arrow pointing up. That's on each person to keep working and let the chips fall where they may." Odin knows the Dolphins must find a way to allow fewer completions, but also create more turnovers. The Dolphins had only 9 interceptions last year, which ranked them 28th in the NFL. Miami forced only 15 turnovers, which ranked 29th in the NFL. So yeah, there you go, guys. Yeah, I mean, my opinion on this, I think it's very hard to pinpoint what their reasons were because it happened so early on in the season, but I thought it got worse. I thought the defense really played well over the course of the first few games, but as the season went along, it just got worse and worse. And I think that's because the offense was so bad, and it was so bad from the start. It wasn't like it just got bad over like a 10-game stretch or something like that. No, it was bad from week 1 to week 17. It was so bad. It never got to be consistent at all. And I think that really affected the defense a lot. And I think it just you kind of lose your passion when you're down 14-0 in the first quarter. And again, you're not going to communicate. You're not as engaged as you would be if the game was closer, if that makes any sense. So maybe that had something to do with it as well, because of the offense's ineptability to do anything right. Really affected the defense, because there were times that season where the defense played so well. I mean, against the Saints, we only allowed 20 points. Our offense scored a donut, but the defense only allowed 20 points. That offense was killing people last year. I mean, they were scoring 35 easy on defenses that ranked way higher than us. And if our offense could score 21 points, we would have won that game. I mean, that's just 3 touchdowns. That's not a lot. And an NFL franchise should be able to score 3 touchdowns in a game. I mean, that's just... they should be able to do that. So I think some of it also had to do with the offense as well. If the offense put our team in better field position, kept us in games, and wasn't so bad, and where the defense had to carry them each and every single week, I think that would have also helped a lot in terms of turnovers and stuff of that nature. And that affects turnovers. When you're up in a football game, especially if you're up double digits or you're up 2 possessions, the offensive play calling is going to be way more conservative. The defense is going to press themselves more as well. They're going to think, oh, we can't even give up a 5-yard flat route right now because that's just going to put them in a good down and distance, and they're going to keep the clock running. So your defense plays different. The opposing offense is going to play different. They're not pressing. They're fast and loose because they're up double digits, and that's going to lead to less turnovers. And if they were pressing, if they were under pressure, like, guys, we have to score, then that right there is going to cause more turnovers because they're going to play a little bit more aggressive. Same thing with your defense. It's just a different ball game. I mean, it's so crazy. People forget how offense and defense go hand in hand, and if one of your groups are not doing well, it affects the other one as well to a great amount. So I think some of that had to do with it as well. It wasn't just coaching. It had to do with a lot of the offense being so bad. This next news story comes from the Palm Beach Post. Dolphins, quote, thought it was a joke when presented with the chance to trade for Robert Quinn. The sequence in which the Dolphins landed former All-Pro defensive end Robert Quinn literally was unbelievable to the people at the center of it. This was not a possibility the team had thought much about, and it came as quite a surprise in February when the Rams offered him for the mere price of a 4th-round pick. Miami Dolphins defensive coordinator Matt Burke has enjoyed a good offseason, though Adam Gase must have been messing with him when he called and said, "Take a look at Robert Quinn and let me know." Robert Quinn, really? Matt Burke said. Take a look at his film, really? And then when Adam Gase called him back to say, "What did you think about the film?" Matt Burke said, yes, 100%, I'm on board. Still, Gase insisted they do their due diligence anyway, so Burke went to freshly hired defensive line coach Chris Kirk, or however you say his name, and told him they need to watch Quinn's film from last season to make sure they weren't any red flags. It'd have to be a quick review because Mike Tannenbaum, Gase, and Chris Greer didn't want this opportunity to get away from them. Much like his boss, Kirk would, or however you say his name, was slightly suspicious that this was some kind of prank, not having worked there long. Perhaps this was some kind of hazing. Maybe the next request would have been to look at J.J. Watt's film just for a laugh. The first words out of his mouth was, "Come on now." Burke came in to my office and he thought it was a joke to begin with, and Kirk said, quote, I kind of said the same thing when Coach Burke said he wanted to watch Robert Quinn film. Let's see here. It's been 3 years since Robert Quinn was a Pro Bowler, but his overwhelming talent was still evident. The Los Angeles Rams were using him as more of an outside linebacker, and Burke envisions him moving back to a traditional defensive end spot opposite Cameron Wake. They believed the perfect fix to their defensive line issue had landed in their laps. Burke called Gase back and said, quote, "Hey, my answer is still the same, 100% yes." The deal got done during the NFL Combine. It couldn't officially be processed until the start of the new league year, mid-March, and everything fit perfectly on Miami's end. The team had an extra 4th-round pick from trading Jay Ajayi to the Philadelphia Eagles, so parting with this one wasn't devastating. So my opinions on this still stay the same when we made the trade. I'm glad that the defensive coaches love him so much. And if you watch interviews with like Jeff Fisher and and again, this was years ago, so again, take it with a grain of salt, but they had nothing but great things to say about him. And it speaks to his athleticism that he can go from a 4-3 hand-in-the-dirt defensive end to an outside linebacker in the NFL. That's pretty impressive. I think that's very, very impressive. I think he's the most athletic 4-3 defensive end in the league. I don't even think it's close. Usually you see explosiveness like that in an outside 3-4 linebacker like a Von Miller, like a DeMarcus Ware, and players like that, not in a 4-3 defensive end. It's very rare to find somebody that explosive. I think the only other player I can think of that's that athletic, that's a 4-3 defensive end, Jadeveon Clowney's listed as an outside linebacker, but he's not. He's mainly a 4-3 defensive end or a 3-4 defensive end. But like I guess Myles Garrett is the only other one that's could even come close to that kind of athleticism. Maybe Dwight Freeney in his heyday. So yeah, Robert Quinn is a very special talent. And again, he hasn't been that player in a long time due to injuries, and obviously switching positions has also affected that. But I think he got 8 sacks out of position last season. So to get 8 sacks, it's almost double-digit sacks out of position, going back to your natural position where you had the most success, and hopefully being healthy, I think spells great news for the Dolphins. So my opinion has not changed on that since we traded for him. I still think Robert Quinn is a great player. I still think that. And again, everything's in context. You always have to look at things in context. And to be fair to Robert Quinn, and again, you could go the other way with it as well. He did deal with a lot of up and downs in those particular seasons. So if we get him healthy, and now that he's at his natural position, I think nothing but good things will come. This next news story comes from the Sun Sentinel. Dolphins Hall of Famer Jason Taylor says Ryan Tannehill is due some respect. Jason Taylor and his fellow defenders carried the Miami Dolphins franchise during the post-Dan Marino era, so he knows a thing or two about lackluster quarterback play. That's why Taylor was inducted into the Pro Football Hall of Fame in 2017, because of the dominant performances he gave Miami during his 15-year career. Said he's tired of listening to the radio and television shows bash Ryan Tannehill and downplay his development. Jason Taylor said, quote, people can say whatever they want. They want to replace him, and I'm like, who are you going to get? Tannehill is in the top half of the league's quarterback under center. Tannehill is the Dolphins' projected starter after missing the past 20 games because of a left knee injury, which put the team in the hands of Jay Cutler in 2017. Jason Taylor said, quote, sometimes people just don't understand what they have until it's gone, Taylor said, who spoke between sessions of Saturday's NFL Youth Camp, a charity event in which he led young attendees through a series of fundamental football skills and drills. Jason said, quote, last year with Tannehill not being, or never mind, that's not a quote, see the struggles offensively and as a team. Jason said, quote, look back a couple years ago when they were in the playoffs, and that progression he was on with Adam Gase. So yeah, that's what Jason Taylor had to say about Tannehill. I'll see if we have any more quotes here from Jason Taylor. No, we don't. Very fascinating stuff from Jason Taylor. I think he speaks from a person who's watched Tannehill throughout his career, and it's very different. If you go ask somebody who's like a major media member and like at Fox or ESPN and go, "What do you think of Ryan Tannehill?" They're just gonna go from history of the NFL. Like, he hasn't played in any big games. He hasn't been in an AFC Championship. He hasn't been in a playoff game. He hasn't done anything that's been on the main stage. He hasn't been in a lot of primetime games. All of his best games were not in primetime. So he doesn't get national recognition because of that. If he was going to playoff games, if he was in AFC Championships, if he was on Monday Night Football like Tony Romo was throughout his career, and that's one of the reasons why everybody loves Tony Romo, is because the man was in primetime football like almost every single week. And you saw some of those performances that Tannehill had on like a Sunday Night Football, Thursday Night Football, Thursday Night Football, stuff of that nature. He would get way more recognition, and that's why if you ask one of these big media guys in ESPN or Fox and stuff of that nature, they're not going to talk about him because there's no reason for them to talk about him, because the national public don't know anything about Tannehill. They have no idea about Tannehill. They haven't watched him probably at all. They've probably seen maybe 3 or 4 games in his entire career. So I think that has a lot to do with it as well. So hopefully that changes. Hopefully when we start kicking tail and putting our big toe up anuses and really start get the ball rolling, I think we're gonna start getting more national recognition. And I think that, again, I think, not to repeat myself, but yeah, I think that's the main reason. I don't think it has anything to do with Tannehill's talent. I think it has something to do with just all of those things that I just mentioned. So yeah, like Jason Taylor said, he deserves some respect, and hopefully he gets more respect down the line. And I'm really hoping for that, because I love Tannehill and everything that he's been through in his career. It would be like a storybook ending for him from age 30 on in his career, just to have a stellar Dolphins career. And if he does do that, I think he'll go down as one of the greatest Dolphins ever. And I don't think he has to do that much more to do that, to be honest with you. I think he's the 3rd best quarterback we've ever had. I think Dan Marino and Bob Greasy, obviously those guys are going to rank over him, but I think Tannehill, nobody even comes close to him. I mean, Jay Fielder, Chad Henne, Trent Green at one point. God, I mean, there's been Dante Culpepper. I can't even name all the quarterbacks for the post Dan Marino. Scott Mitchell. Dan Marino era. Who's the kid? Bob Greasy's son at one point. Brian Greasy, I think, was a Dolphin. It hurts my head even thinking about it. But yeah, I think Tane, again, you guys get what I'm saying. This next news story, comes from the Palm Beach Post. New wide receiver Albert Wilson is playing everywhere for the Miami Dolphins. We touched on this later, but I just want to read a quote from receivers coach Ben Johnson. Quote, this is from our receiver coach. He's really done a nice job the past 2 weeks. It's really triggered us to say he's not limited in the slot. He's not limited on the outside. He can line up in the backfield. He can do so many different things for us. His versatility is really, really, really showing up. So I think that's good news for us. He caught a 54-yard touchdown in one of the first practices with Ryan Tannehill. It was something crazy like that. Tannehill bombed it to him. And that just goes to show you his speed. And again, our offense, and especially since we want to be on the ball, a no-huddle offense, with all that speed on the field, it's going to wear down defenses. We're going to have a lot of big play opportunities if we execute the no-huddle offense the right way. We're going to have a lot of different players that can make big splash plays. So our offenses should be very, very fun to watch this upcoming season. This next news story, Dolphins Devontae Parker finally having a low-profile off-season. This comes from the Sun Sentinel. It appears the Miami Dolphins and possibly the Dolphins media are finally starting to cool on grand predictions about the wide receiver Devontae Parker. Last year's terms such as, quote, he's a monster, quote, great big year, gigantic year, were used by Dolphins coaches as predictions for Parker's 2017 season. But Parker, the 2015 first-round pick, ended with 57 receptions for 670 yards and 1 touchdown, and yet another injury-slowed season. I'm going to pause for a second. And I've been really hard on Devontae Parker the last few episodes, and I think I got to give the man his due. Just to kind of give another perspective on his career, right? So if we read these numbers, 57 receptions for 670 yards. If he was a third to even a second-round pick, right, that's pretty good numbers, right? That's not bad to be the third best receiver on your team in terms of the depth chart and performance. That's not terrible. That's like okay, like you're a good NFL starter, but to be the first round pick and to have everything that comes with that, and to have all the hype that he had coming out of college, that's why we look at those numbers and be like, man, he can do so much more. And we're only asking for him to get 400 more yards, and that sounds like, that obviously sounds ridiculous because getting 400 more yards in an NFL season is like very, very hard. But that's what we expect from him, and I don't think it's that much of a leap in his development to go out and get 400 more yards because he's going to see the ball more, he's going to get more targets, all of those things come with it, and I think he has a better chemistry with Ryan Tannehill than he had with Jay Cutler. Jay Cutler's favorite target was not even Kenny Stills. I think it was probably Jarvis, I guess. Yeah. And now that the ball's going to be spread around more, I think that should add on to those stats just a little bit more. So again, I have been really harsh on him, but there is a way for Devontae to have 1,100 yards and 50 or 65 receptions. I mean, and 10 touchdowns. He can do that, and he's been on the cusp of that before. It just takes consistency, and I think more targets and staying healthy. I think all of those things are going to help him be the player that we thought he could be. So again, yeah, this article brings up a great point. To not overhype Devontae Parker, and it's a good thing that the media isn't overhyping him. So yeah, to really just lower expectations. Like I said, 670 yards. Just have 400. Just you know what I'm saying? Just you know what I'm saying? Just have 400 yards onto that. This next news story comes from Pro Football Talk. Danny Amendola is much more popular in Miami now. Danny Amendola was never very popular in the Miami Dolphins locker room until he was. When the Dolphins signed the former Patriot wideout this offseason, they gained a talented performer as well as a new friend. Amendola scrapped on the field with Dolphins quarterback Bobby McCain last year in an incident which led to an ejection and eventually a $9,000 fine for McCain. Danny Amendola says, quote, I have a lot of respect for Bobby. He said, quote, we're teammates, it's nothing personal, we're good. He said, see here, this is the quote from Danny or Bob, I think this is Danny. He said, quote, he and I are cut from the same, this is from Danny. Danny said, quote, he and I are cut from the same cloth. We like to compete. It brings both of us together. He's made me better, and I'm competing my tail off against him. Likewise, Bobby McCain was ready to leave that in the past. He said, quote, Bobby said, quote, "We hope to bring a championship to this city, and with him being in New England, he's got a couple piled up. And at the end of the day, he is here, and we're ready to get it." So there you go, Danny Amendola being really well received, and him and Tannehill reportedly have a very, 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 very nice connection building so far this offseason. This next news story comes from the Palm Beach Post. Josh Sitton is bringing what big money guard Josh Sitton is bringing to the Miami Dolphins. Josh Sitton had an idea at a recent Miami Dolphins organized team activity practice. Sitton decided the offensive lineman should participate in a pass punt kick competition, which we all love seeing offensive line. All of us love offensive linemen. I don't think there's, unless of course you're Dallas Thomas or Billy Turner, I think for the most part we all love offensive linemen. They're goofy, they're crazy, they're funny, they smell, they're sweaty. I mean, we all love them. So to see them kick, punt, and pass, pretty fun. I definitely want to see a 40-yard dash with those guys too. Justin said, offensive line coach Jeremiah Washburn said, quote, "He's a very competitive guy. He's just a natural athlete. Anyone who's been around a Dolphins practice has seen how well offensive tackles Laremy Tunsil and Jawad James can throw a football. For such big men, they really are nimble, all-around athletes." So yeah, there you go. Just a little peek into what Josh Sitton brings to the Dolphins. He brings a little bit of levity and passion to the game, and he really is the leader of that offense. And Jawad James and Laramie, by all accounts, have just taken, and Jesse Davis as well, have been just really taken with him and really look up to him and want to learn from him. So I think that the whole culture thing, what the Dolphins were aiming for so far, has worked, especially with this offensive line. So very, very happy with that. This comes from the Palm Beach Post. Ryan Tannehill's trash talk keeps coming, and Miami Dolphins love it. I thought this was a great article because everybody, if you guys remember back in the day, everybody was like, "Oh, he shows no emotion on the field," which I think is the most ridiculous thing. And I think all of that got turned around in 2016. We saw Tannehill throw a bomb to Kenny Stills and just pretty much rub it in the Bills' face while he was running it. This was the funniest thing ever, where he was running down the sideline with Kenny Stills. When we sacked Colin Kaepernick for the win, he chest bumped Kiko Alonso at midfield. He was the first one to go out there and celebrate with the defense. And then obviously when he tore his knee up, the man was bawling, crying on the sideline because football had been taken away from him, and it was very, very emotional. So Tannehill is a very emotional person, and I thought we really saw that in 2016. I think this just adds on to that, and especially for people out there like, "Oh, he's not Brett Favre. He never looks like he's having fun out there. He's never, just." That's kind of what people relate to, is that fun-loving quarterback that shows emotion and is playing around with his teammates. And I think we saw that in 2016. I think we're seeing more of that in the 2018 offseason. I think that brings light to this. Again, this comes from the Palm Beach Post. Ryan Tannehill's trash talk keeps coming. Miami Dolphins love it. The return of Ryan Tannehill has not happened quietly. The Dolphins have been saying throughout the offseason that he's got the ability to turn around a 6-10 team, and Tannehill has been vocal in his own way. During the first 2 weeks of organized activities, players on both sides of the ball have noticed him getting feisty with the defense. This is a quote from TJ McDonald. He says, "Ryan does a great job of not only," or no, this is from Kenny Stills, excuse me. This is a quote from Kenny. Kenny said, quote, "Ryan does a great job of not only relating to the guys on the offense, but talking to the guys on offense, but getting over and talking a little trash to the guys on defense, not feeling that he's uncomfortable going over there and talking some trash. It gets things going if we need that spark in practice." And again, that's what I'm talking about with player. That is not a PR thing to say. That is something that just is spontaneous, that we have never heard anybody say about Tannehill, ever. So when you heard me guys, talk about Tannehill in last week's episode, this is just what I'm talking about right here, this kind of stuff. While Tannehill has some history of running his mouth at practice, it's not something players mentioned at all in 2016. It's also something that was almost certainly missing last year when Tannehill was out and the Dolphins relied on Jay Cutler. Dolphins safety TJ McDonald pointed out this week that Tannehill has been bold about drawing back at the defense and said that it's elevated the competition at practice. That is a leader. That is a leader right there, ladies and gentlemen. That's a leader of men right there. Tannehill had arguably his best season the last time he played, and we've heard this a million times. Okay, we get it. So you guys get it. I mean, it's funny to hear Tannehill. That's just not, again, he's matured into this player that we know today. That's just not what he used to be. And it's just fun to see that. And really, really fun to see what we have not had somebody like this, especially at the quarterback position, since Dan, with that kind of personality, with that kind of dedication to his craft, with that kind of just charisma and stuff of that nature. I'm not saying he's Dan Marino, because Dan Marino was obviously the most relatable quarterback ever, but Ryan Tannehill has those traits. He has those qualities, and before, people didn't think he had those, and again, it's just showing how much he has matured over his tenure as a Dolphin. So yeah, that's about it, guys. I was gonna throw in here another story about how Kiko Alonso needs to do better, but I'm pretty sure we all know that. So we really do not need to get into that. So yeah, that's about it for the news today. I hope you guys enjoyed it. We have a lot to look forward to this season. It's gonna be a fun one. It's gonna be a very, 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 very fun one, and I can't wait for this season, especially in the AFC. So I am Skagster83, and I will see you guys in the next one.